So welcome. As I mentioned to some of the earlier guests, we would love to engage you throughout the conversation. We'll be doing our best to be monitoring the chat as well as the Q&A feature. And we have hopefully timed our remarks so that we'll leave about 15 minutes at the end that we can really answer some of those specific questions and go deeper on any particular element that might be of interest to you. So welcome, thank you for joining us. And I know that this is the end of the Concordia Summit in many ways for those of you who have been participating in this week's phenomenal first, I think, hybrid summit. But for us, this is a kickoff. It's really a pep rally for social impact. And I think Alan might have noticed I'm wearing a PLU shirt. I was the captain of my cheerleading team. So today I'm the chief cheer officer for social impact. And we really want to share the work that PLU has been doing and invite you to come along on the journey. I'm joined by colleagues from Pacific Lutheran University, Mr. George Zeno, Dr. Mark Mulder, and Dr. Mike Halvorson. So I'm definitely not the brains of the operation, but happy to guide you through this conversation. I'm Shelly Kurtz, and I'm the co-founder of X for Impact and Giving Tech Labs, where we have been building and scaling technology for the public interest since 2017. But today I wear two additional hats. One, as a proud alumna of the university, and two, as a new advisor for Concordia. And I'm really thrilled to be representing a cross-sector group of hopefully catalysts for change. And I know there have been a lot of interesting conversations happening this week. I hope that you'll have a chance to follow up on these connections. We're excited to share the PLU story with you today. The intention is for this work to accrue as a model for other universities to follow. And we're really giving you a first look at the work that we have done to tackle the challenges and the opportunities in meeting this moment, which frankly, has some uncertainty around the role of higher education in our changing landscape. So looking at the numbers, the really exciting part is that we have a huge opportunity. Imagine what we could do with an army of 21.5 million change makers ready to get to work around social and environmental progress. So that is really the big picture here in the United States. Ultimately, there's a global opportunity. But with every sound business plan, we want to start with a pilot. And we are here today to offer PLU as a pilot, as a testing ground to learn and report and create impact at a local level. Let's go to the next slide. So PLU, as I mentioned earlier to some that were joining, it's a university that has a rich history, 130 years. And yet the mission and the ethos of PLU is just as relevant today, really educating students for lives of thoughtful inquiry, service, leadership, and care. And this work that we're going to be presenting today is really just an unpacking of some of those early words and putting that into action. And we hope that you will hold us to these ideals and that we can create an opportunity to work together. Let's go to the next slide. So there are three design considerations that we look at PLU as we think about what it might look like to really orient the whole university around social impact, not just one school or one program, but the entire institution as an anchor for the community and for just a piece of this collective impact ecosystem. I think it's important that we use this as a checklist and perhaps for other universities to think about in terms of principles and practices as a way to just sort of guide if you're getting off track. We want to always approach the work with a focus on diversity, justice, and sustainability. And I would add that sustainability has two parts. One is maybe the more traditional model in conversations around ESG, meaning environmental sustainability and practices, but also in financial sustainability and stewardship, making sure that the work that we do can last as a legacy without continually needing to go back to the wells of traditional philanthropy and other catalytic investments. And we always want to center the work around the community. And lastly, look at the kind of partnership development and system building that PLU can create. So I'm really excited to move through and give you a sneak peek quickly at the model that we have developed. The really sort of key pieces of this program around social impact innovation anchor on these two interconnected programs. One, which is called PLU Listens, that is really the engagement and co-designing piece. And the second is PLU Cares, which is the outcomes that are actually implemented in the community. And you can imagine this as something that's portable for all universities. XYZ University Listens and XYZ University Cares. So throughout the presentation, we're going to be referring back to these programs and go into them in more detail. But let's go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Mark Mulder, who's going to be talking to us about really the setting of the university and provide some context for how we think about PLU as being right in the heart of an opportunity zone where we can address all of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in one place.
Thank you, Shelly. I'm going to talk a little bit about Parkland, and I'm also going to talk about the foundation of listening and why it's so important to us and why we spend a lot of time thinking about the context of listening. Parkland was a rural community of open prairie land in the late 1800s. Over time, and as a ripple effect of the Great Depression, it was developed more than 80 years ago into a community with smaller lot sizes and smaller homes. The university, shown in yellow, is located next to the largest military base in the US based on geographic size. And the university is located now within a heavily populated area. The snapshot on the right shows a variety of changes, challenges, and needs, all from which opportunities can arise. Note the socioeconomic snapshot of the community and the lack of funding due to a lack of infrastructure, even as important needs are identified. The reality for Parkland, now as a beautifully diverse community, is that it offers a lens through which important collaboration, needs, insights, and potential solutions can emerge. And collaborative insights from a community such as Parkland naturally offer broader solutions that can be used regionally and nationally. Often community needs are assessed from the outside in. As helpers, we often see community needs through our trained eyes. There might be outside observations that suggest needs in the areas of transportation, food security, literacy, or healthcare. This is helpful and informed, though what might happen if we truly listen to the community to understand how they see their reality? Where are their points of pain, and where do they see hope? While there is community collaboration amongst many of us in the room, and while it's authentic and in a desire to do good, the reality is that interactions are typically disparate in nature, perhaps siloed in nature, and are often project-based, which is also related to short-term engagement. The way needs are seen from a community perspective might be different than what a partner or organization might see. There may be similar needs identified, but how they are seen and perhaps how they are arranged might be different. Some needs may be perceived as unmet or even ignored from the community's perspective. The reality is that community needs are not disparate and are contained within an ecosystem. It's possible that some needs may be aligned in part with other needs. To see this, we need systems thinking to inform our work. We must not only see needs, we must also see potential relationships. This is why the PLU Listens process is being designed to encourage universities to play a central role in seeking the broad community voice and opportunity. In this new era of innovation and engagement, the university can serve both as a convener and as a partner. Universities are uniquely positioned to serve in the role of convener, seeking to do a broad survey of the community regarding the needs that they see, and to really do a lot of listening rather than the typical jump to a potential solution. I was part of a research team that sought to understand how international communities want to interact with potential partners. And their key request was listening. They wanted partners to really understand them first, even before a collaborative project, and to build a relationship over time. Thus, as a convener and a potential partner, it's not a transactional relationship, for example, a one-off process, but rather one that partners and collaborates long-term. The listening process turns into a broad list of needs. And there is potential that other partners can assemble collaboratively, helping to come on board to also first understand and then to build collective impact. The foundation may be design thinking or human-centered design, though the process is intentionally collaborative. We have opportunities to co-design possible approaches and to pilot them together. Additional learning and data can be developed within an iterative process. The circular graph on the far right is the collective impact cycle, which we'll talk about in more detail later in the presentation. This is connected to our ecosystem approach. And what I love about the model is that strategic learning is a central component, and that strategic learning follows listening and co-design. While all needs are not the same in different communities, many are replicated in different areas regionally and nationally. Thus, our systemic approach to identifying needs and possible solutions can be replicated by others. Funding partnerships help make this happen. And the best part, universities have lots of passionate resources via students who want to make a difference in the world as they develop their skills. Next, Dr. Halvorson will introduce this very group, students, as agents of change.
Well, good afternoon. As part of this presentation about preparing students for social impact, I'd like to describe the current group of students that we have at Pacific Lutheran University and share with you the excitement that we have about equipping the next generation for meaningful lives of service, leadership, and care. Our university has a lot in common with many small colleges in the United States. In terms of demographics, we have 2,900 students enrolled, and of this student body, about 40% identify as students of color and 33% as first-generation students. Although we have students from 40 states and 14 countries, the majority of our Lutes hail from the Pacific Northwest, and they have a deep connection to the region. We take seriously our job of training the next generation to be a competitive workforce, be it through jobs in the private sector, public sector, or a lineup of remarkable nonprofits in our region. PLU has a creative mix of liberal arts and professional programs. And students come to us telling us that they want to make a difference in the world in a variety of ways. And look, they also have creative aspirations. They want to study science and music, social justice and dance, business and philosophy. Some want to be jazz guitarists or YouTube personalities or Peace Corps volunteers, and they're motivated by meaning. I think they tend to see the world as a fragile and unpredictable place. And like all of our institutions, students are concerned with comprehensive social issues such as diversity, justice, and sustainability. Usually in the first year, many begin working on community projects and they find ways to work in our local neighborhoods. Here you can see Lutz meeting with local Parkland artists on a community mural project. The process of designing this display allowed students and community members to talk about their values and their needs. It helped to break down barriers and prompted new skill development in deep listening, design thinking, and creative conversation. A similar project took shape recently at the Parkland Literacy Center, where students and faculty worked with community members to encourage reading skills and language skill development. At every turn, when we expose students to creative engagement with the community, we find that they learn rapidly and they learn more. From capstone projects to fellowships to internships to community work that students do, it creates connective tissue among their social, vocational, and academic experiences. But in reality, we also find that our semester schedules just don't match the real work experiences in the world. And when we have success in one area of the community, as Professor Mulder said, That achievement sometimes is unrecognized in other parts of the community or other parts of our campus, or maybe our individual units. There are definitely blind spots and sometimes ignored or unmet needs. For example, a local science program involving PLU faculty that focuses on young people might really engage people in the local schools, but it could be disconnected from a PLU music program that is designed to connect with students in the same district. This is because most college projects, and this is the case for our university and many others, they have a relatively limited scope. They're designed for individual students and sometimes cohorts. In terms of technology, our data gathering among these programs is rather disconnected, and we learn from one community experience something that is generally lost when we talk about another experience. Sometimes it appears in a course evaluation or an annual report. So we're looking to change this. And at PLU, that means a university that is committed to more holistic approaches related to problem solving. It means community integration and designing systems that gather people from across campus, plan and track projects in comprehensive ways, and align academic preparation to purpose. Several pilot programs are underway now, including Innovation Studies, which teaches design thinking and the principles of human-centered design. These problem-solving skills are stretched across the university and applied to majors in all 6 academic units of our campus. When students graduate, they have learned practical problem-solving skills that are designed for social impact and the workplace. By teaching a common language about innovation and scaling the solutions across the community, we have the tools to produce graduates that will be ready for work in a variety of contexts, both the jobs of today and the opportunities of tomorrow. So here's the challenge. Our current students are asking for more holistic systems that provide meaning as well as workplace readiness. They are ready for social impact and lifelong service. With careful planning and appropriate technologies, we can prepare all of our students to do this work. We welcome your ideas about how to develop and scale these tools. And now I'd like to introduce George Zeno, our Vice President of Advancement, who will present our case for collaboration.
Thanks, Professor Halvorson. As a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner in philanthropy, one thing that's become clear to me in the past few years, especially after George Floyd's death, is the need to be intentional and accountable in moving our communities forward in diversity, justice, and sustainability for all that we do, especially around mobilizing resources for impact. My experiences on the front line of higher education, global health, and business development have led me to examine how a community-focused digital platform can accelerate progress. There are 4 critical areas that I'm examining from the lens of resources and impact that I believe can be transformational for our sector. Capacity building for civic impact, increasing access to investment capital, whole system thinking, and resource mobilization. What if more of us had the capability to convene community and actively listen, deploy diplomacy to guide collective effort, and use equity-centered design thinking to collaborate and problem solve with other community members? As Professor Halvorson points out, purpose-driven liberal arts universities like PLU are preparing the next generation of change makers who will be practiced in these essential skills no matter what degree is pursued. Now imagine a university has the ability to respond to community needs by deploying alumni through pro bono and mentoring support, students through scholarships and fellowships, paid internships and work study, or undergraduate research that might inspire social enterprise or product solutions, or faculty through industry research and consultancy, or even perhaps the development of shared spaces that alleviate the debt burden of nonprofit partners so they can reach more people and serve our planet. With a digital platform solution like PLU Listens, PLU Cares, venture and philanthropic investments can then deliver the multiplier effect of building capacity of the university and the capability of the program beneficiaries while accelerating social innovation adoption by nonprofits and public systems. We are seeing early indicators of how corporations and venture capitalists are responding to investing in social change. The Washington Post reports that in America, the 50 biggest public companies and their foundations collectively committed about $50 billion since George Floyd's murder in addressing racial inequality. $45 billion is committed to loans and investments, while $5 billion is going to outright grants. Corporations seem to be betting on sustainable economic development solutions that attempt to add social value with a financial return. Unlocking capital investments could have exponential impact if community needs are aligned with emerging businesses, partnership development, and access to investment resources, especially for Black and Brown and rural white business owners and developers. I grew up in poor conditions. One of the earliest things you learn from watching a low-income parent is that all things are connected together in a very fragile ecosystem. If one thing breaks down or new costs arise unexpectedly, it could have a cascading effect for years. I'm a whole system thinker from watching my mom figure out how to get to work on a bus, arrange for childcare with a neighbor, and ask my relatives to take us to doctor appointments so she didn't lose hours and income. Unfortunately, as Professor Mulder demonstrated, our solutions don't often function in a similar system view. We want to be able to speak to the interconnected needs of people, especially impacted families who often are challenged with similar patterns around transportation, housing, childcare access, healthcare, and education readiness that limit the potential of current and future income producers that in return impact life expectancies. So when we talk about health equity, we're talking about this. They all belong to an impacted ecosystem, and it's that system that reinforces inequities that are passed down generationally. Partnership development is key to connecting these seemingly disparate dots. A digital platform can prepare governments, nonprofits, healthcare systems, universities, and businesses with the capability of designing large-scale initiatives like youth development, healthy living, community planning, and workforce readiness across neighborhoods, cities, and regions. As a nearly 30-year professional in philanthropy, I've been schooled in donor-centered fundraising and resource mobilization. This very traditional model often isolates donors from each other and from those who are most likely to benefit from an intervention or access to an opportunity. Their investments are often disconnected from the learning and development of comprehensive approaches to the continuum of care that's needed. This results in a power dynamic that often plays out in wealthy donors and program officers using their assumptions and their theoretical models and designing outcomes of programs, designing outcomes of programs without understanding the nuances of those with lived experiences who are most impacted and closest to the challenges. We've watched this played out in Seattle with our unhoused crisis, with hundreds of millions of public and private dollars invested in ineffective housing solutions. We've been examining models that would allow us to organize for impact with our community partners. FSG is one of the leading consultancies of public-private partnerships, has developed a collective impact model that we are leaning into to better understand how we can center the community's voice in designing and responding to community need that invites funders, partners, and beneficiaries to the solution design process and leverage assets, resources, and talents, especially pro bono talent, that drive interdependent outcomes. We want to be intentional about equity-centered approaches in philanthropy and economic development. Having a platform that centralizes a curated agenda allows for expedited action and system building that can reduce inequities and drive efficiencies in solution approaches. These are 4 discovery areas that are not new nor unknown. They are, however, challenges that are critical to meeting the growing complexities of our democracy that need urgent addressing. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Shelly, who's going to guide us in discussing the structural components of what this market solution platform looks like.
Thank you, Mr. Zeno. I know we've been giving you a lot, so I'll just give you a quick bullet point. We're going to go over the program design so you can see it in a broader way. We're also going to look at the program workflow, and lastly, talk about the next steps forward as we pilot this work and invite you to join us. So let's go ahead and dive into the program model. This is a lot to look at, but just consider this our whiteboard to try to visualize the process in which PLU and ultimately other universities we hope will follow to first engage that although we want to have a unique one-on-one experience in listening to the community in as many ways as possible, we want to make sure that we structure the data so that it can really be something that we can report on and understand from a broader perspective. And so this is one of the key differences between some of the beautiful examples that Dr. Halvorson shared about the mural, or some of those specific examples of internships or programs and projects. Those were happening within the construct of a capstone or an individual professor or a program that happened. And what we want to do is have a full intake process so that all of the needs of the community, whether they are captured through conversations or through structured listening sessions, or even through the website or other digital tools, kind of a digital comment box, that can all come through a centralized database, so that the whole university and ultimately even partners and others can see the needs in a structured way. And so we have lots of different ways that listening will happen. And some of this gets a little techie and nerdy, so I apologize for some of the shorthand here, but there'll be a data capture form, and the MVP, for those of you that are in technology, that stands for kind of minimum viable product. What is the sort of early quick iteration that we can do before we invest a lot in building a technical a technical system? So that may just be Google Forms or some other process. But then we will have a curation process that we are hopeful to engage with students and members of staff, but ultimately will also be part of the work of an advisory council that we're putting together for the social impact innovation work. And that data will be vetted. And if there are opportunities to connect with third-party partners or nonprofit organizations or industry corporations, we can be able to feed that in. We recognize with a small dedicated team of even 3,000 in the PLU community, we may not be able to implement all of the solutions needed, but there could be opportunities for other partners to do that. And we also want to showcase these opportunities to donors, both existing and future engaged committed funders that may be interested in just a particular slice of this work, perhaps if it involves young children or veterans or mental health or an environmental impact area, so that we can recognize that we can tailor the kind of support around individual projects as well as the program overall, that holistically will be capturing the needs of the community, sharing that out, having a research-based approach, and being able to really focus on learning through execution by selecting, a handful of projects to really go all the way through with custom-built solutions that could eventually become their own social enterprises and exit PLU to have a life of their own. And so that is really the process in which the PLU listens piece will connect to the PLU cares, which is the program and execution work. But even if the demand outstrips supply, which is usually the case in this social progress work, we will have an opportunity to share that with broader partners so that corporations and governments and nonprofit partners can take on that need and have a new perspective. So as Dr. Halvorson is sharing now, the workflow is really that we are creating meaningful learning and intellectual property all the way through. And we want to really document this learning in a way that is across the university and open access, so that the lessons learned, sometimes the hard way, don't have to be repeated by other universities or other collective impact groups working together to solve. And that this data would really be the central way that we can report on impact. Impact-driven philanthropy is based on understanding that donors and supporters want more at the end of the year than a thank you note and a tax receipt. They really want to know, how many people did I help? Or if I was being asked to support a project, what are the outcomes? Are we reducing those original problem areas, whether that is transportation for single mothers or some other single-use plastics or other issues. So we want to report on that, and then really have this quality group of projects and ventures ready to move forward and scale. And scale can be for the state, it could be for the US, it could be globally. We really want to be able to create a testing ground and have the opportunity to work directly with partners outside of what we affectionately call as the loot dome. So getting outside the bubble of academia. And that's really one of the reasons that we wanted to do this today, is be part of the global stage and open the conversation with others so that PLU is not doing this alone, and that we can hold a magnifying glass to ourselves and be transparent and vulnerable and saying, we don't have the answers, but this is where we're headed. And so the path for us is really to define this program more fully. We invite you to share your comments either directly in this conversation or afterwards. Mr. George Zeno is leading the task force for the social impact innovation work and is open. So find him through the Concordia app or on LinkedIn, or send a honing pigeon. And even the president of the university has offered in the chat to be able to be a direct resource. But we're really seeking funding and other types of talent and support to be able to have a broad perspective, to go in with a multidisciplinary team and an approach focused on inclusion to execute the pilot. And then we'll be learning and reporting on impact, looking at cost centers and human capital versus resource allocation, looking at the demographics and the issue areas that have the most need and where we needed to lean in further to refine and scale the model. And so we have a 5-year path to sustainability from a financial perspective, where this can not only be the right thing to do and something that is really engaging for students and the community and stakeholders, but also something that can flip the model and have some revenue potential and new outcomes for the university to be really an innovation hub. And what we would love at the end of the day would be for universities to be seen as the pathway to become social innovators. We know there's a lot of different ways that we all come into this work. This was not my first mountain, as they say, but if we can show students and even little kids like mine at home that they can go to a university like PLU and come out with more than just a degree and some textbook learning, but have connections to nonprofit partners and NGOs and industry and governments, and understand ways to go from idea to implementation to scale. That's really what we want to see. So at this point, we open it up to any conversations that may have happened on the chat while I was chatting away, or any other conversations that may be coming through. It looks like there's a comment from Dave. He says, I love the idea to capture all of the concepts and needs, and agrees that this will always be in the position of needing more hands to get this all done, and likes the invitation. Thank you, Dave. Well, we're going to follow up with you. We're going to have you step in, because we really believe that many hands make light work, and this is not something we are holding in a closed ecosystem. As George showed in the model, we need partners and we need people that are outside of the PLU world. So if you've never heard of PLU, you have no idea where Parkland is, you don't even know what state we're in, that's okay. That's not the important part. The important part is you want to do meaningful work. You want to work with others to test and learn, and you want to really be able to be on this leading edge, because the big vision is those 21 million students that we can really use to change the narrative against our sustainable development goals, against what it means to be a member of a community, and that we can do things in a way that can be really innovative. We have another comment. Looks like lots of good love and support. So keep that going. We love the hype on the side. So while that's coming in, I will maybe just lead some conversations based on some data points. So we know, according to Gallup, that 4 out of 5 recent college grads say it's an important piece of their work to have purpose. And, obviously, that's been on the rise since COVID. That statistic was pre-COVID in 2019. And I recently talked to a PLU grad who, by the way, is now working in a foundation, one of the country's largest foundations, Silicon Valley Community Foundation. And he happened to be a biology major. And I was talking to him about his path towards social impact. And he said, even though he graduated over 10 years ago, that what stuck with him was the famous Mary Oliver quote that is often used around campus at PLU, which is, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? So I'm just curious, maybe, Mike or Mark or George, you can sort of share, how do you think that educational institutions can prepare students to explore this question in earnest? Is it something that is sort of a personal path, or is there something structural that can come of putting these two pieces together?
I can just speak to that briefly. Thanks, Shelly, and good afternoon, everyone again. One of the nice things about universities is that they can kind of create and foster these value systems that kind of run across time. Although they can be conservative organizations, sometimes they have these value systems that persist and can really open up new areas. At our university, we have a mission statement, and we have sort of an ethos that students are preparing for lives of service, for the community, for the earth. They are intellectually curious, and they're trying to use those gifts to prepare and make the world a better place. And so when you have a kind of a mission statement that's agreed upon, sort of the liberal arts and the professional programs and the way we prepare for workplace readiness, that all kind of flows together. So I would say, in answer to your question, that when a university has a broad agreement on its mission, then finding the tools, for example, to do community impact can really be something that the whole university can kind of be on the same page on. And so that's kind of where I think we're at now as a university. That's why we're able to propose a program like this. I don't know, Pamela.
Yeah, and I love that sorry, I was going to say, when I went through college, someone that was going to do good had just a couple career paths from the outside. It was either you were going to be a social worker, or, maybe you were going to go be a police officer or firefighter. I mean, there wasn't a narrative that there was a lot of other options to go live out, your passions around social impact. At least it wasn't discussed when most of us were growing up. So I love this idea that it is really across all disciplines, and that it goes beyond just, perhaps your specific studies, and you may be someone passionate about human rights or refugees or health pandemics, and that doesn't mean that you need to be in a program specific to that work. Anyone is needed, and in fact, I run several tech companies, and I've never written one line of code. So if there can be also this call to action that we need anthropologists, we need social scientists, we need linguists, we need those with lived experience, we need academics, we also need practitioners, we need technology more than ever. Digital innovation is a critical piece of this, so that we can scale and collect data and ensure that we are reducing costs for all. I think ultimately the vision of this work is, if you think about the 100-year plan, as Masa from SoftBank would encourage us to do, what happens 100 years from now as a legacy from this moment is that you would have this interconnected system of all higher education institutions using a single platform, and that there would be this model that is just assumed to be there, that of course it would have always been there, that in 5 years even we can say, how did we all do this alone? Why was everyone working so hard individually? My next question is Parkland. I've talked to several people and they go, I don't even care about Parkland. I don't live in Parkland. That's just one town. It happens to be where the university is based. So why Parkland? Maybe George or Mark, you can sort of address that question. Why does this work matter, and why is this the perfect testing ground for this sort of evolving role of higher education to spark impact and innovation?
Sure. So I am a resident of Parkland. I live adjacent to our campus and serve in our community. And in my presentation, one of the things I highlighted is that the needs in this community may be somewhat different than other communities, but there is a common thread. There are common challenges, there are common opportunities, and the opportunity for this work, not only in the listening process, but the collaboration, the collective impact, the co-design, and the piloting of potential solutions will have insight for similar types of challenges and opportunities. And so we become the lens, we become the collective lab where people come together to ask important questions, to seek potential solutions together, and then to pilot them. And those insights, not only about needs and potential opportunities, but also pilots, allow for learning to happen, strategic learning as tied to the collective impact model. And so that strategic learning is something that is transportable to other communities. The way that questions are asked, the way that engagement is created, and the way that solutions are piloted have the opportunity to serve as foundations for other communities. So from both a process standpoint and a potential solution standpoint, Parkland becomes a lens through which a variety of communities, whether they're regional or national or even international, there are likely similarities into some of the realities in our community and how we can come around them collectively. So my short answer would be, we become the lens and we become the opportunity for collaboration and learning to be exported into other communities, local, regional, or even national.
Yeah, I love that. I also think when things are hard, that's where you want to start. You know, it's really easy to start a pilot in a place like New York or DC, where the infrastructure of support and collaboration is already established in many ways. But if you can do it in Parkland and make it a success, you can really do it anywhere. So I think, you know, George may also have some comments. There was a question addressed, and I know we just have a couple minutes, but it's an important one. So I want to make sure that we address it properly. And the question is, you know, really just talking about timing. That's quick one. So I'll follow up on that one directly in the chat. But the other one is about how can this innovation approach ensure that historically white supremacist systems and thinking are not replicated? And we have thought a lot about that. And I point to George because he really has been the architect of so much of this system design, but also because he's very passionate personally. So George, why don't you take a stab at that?
Yeah, thank you. You know, this is me living my purpose right now in addressing that direct question, especially with my experience growing up as an African-American man, coming from the South, working in global development, seeing on the front line. You know, what's really important, as Professor Halvorson has explained, is that the importance of using design thinking in what we do. And part of that is understanding that can we better understand the innovations, the programs, the models that we're developing, do they actually create harm? And part of that is testing and understanding when you can test with your community and evaluate through their lens around what progress looks like. Then we can disrupt those patterns that we continue to see that form inequities that continue to be passed down generation to generation. So I'm a big champion of equity-centered design thinking, the ability to center the community's voice, ideate with those community members, draw up a prototype, test that out before you deliver that out to the community, and then evaluating that, bringing success from those most impacted back to the front so we can co-design through success lenses. That way we are ensuring inclusion and how we deliver our mission. So great question.
Thank you, George. And so I just want to close by saying that this work kicks off today. We're actively seeking partners. Consider this day one. All the work we've done over the last few months, sort of day zero in the planning stages. And now we really want to invite philanthropists and alumni and funders and corporates and NGOs and other partners who want to be involved individually or through their organization to join us. And George and the team are ready to set up follow-up meetings and have one-on-one briefings. Both of you have ideas in terms of execution and implementation or would like to be a part of one of these pieces. We'd love to have you. If there's leadership that you're interested in through the advisory council or funding so that this model can really scale and become the engine with the lights on for the world through transparency and reporting, we're happy to share what we learn, and we really appreciate any conversations. And of course, feel free to reach out to me too. And thank you so much to Concordia and to all of you. I think we had about 60 engaged participants, and I love the chat. We'll keep the chat open for a minute, but thank you so much. And we look forward to sharing our next steps. This time next year at Concordia, We will have at least 3 pilots to report on and can't wait to have some of those with lived experience join us. Thank you. That's it. We did it.